Every human brought before the Orc clan's execution circle. Circle reacted the exact same way. They begged, they bargained, they wept, or they painted over their terror with fake bravado. But when they threw the unnamed wanderer into the dirt, he offered absolutely nothing. Condemned to die at dawn, he simply accepted his fate, leaning back in the holding pit with the calm, steady breathing of a man who was profoundly, utterly exhausted. He wasn't running from the law, nor was he hiding from enemies. He was just looking for a quiet place to stop existing. But the warrior princess, daughter of the clan's leader, couldn't look away. Beneath his absolute resignation to death, she uncovered a profound paradox. A man who believed his own life was entirely worthless, yet still stopped to fix a stranger's broken cart, splint a stray dog's leg, and save a choking man. In a world full of people screaming to be noticed and performing fake heroism, his quiet, unremarkable decency was the rarest thing she had ever witnessed. Defying the ancient laws of a tribe and risking the wrath of her own mother, the princess steps into the execution circle to invoke the sacred right of claim. This is a quiet, powerful narrative about a man who gave up on himself and the warrior who refused to let him go.
They didn't kill him. That would have been easier, faster, cleaner. But the human kingdom decided on something worse. Exile. No weapons, no protection, no way back. The Wildlands weren't just a forgotten place. They were a boundary, a warning, where everything human ceased to matter. He was left there at dawn, and by nightfall, he was no longer alone. Now tell me something. Would you have done the same in his place? Or would you have turned your back like everyone else did? Drop a comment below. I want to know. The first signs came from the silence, then from movements in the darkness, and then from the eyes. Orcs. Not a small group, not scouts, an army. He didn't run. He knew it wouldn't help. He knew this would be the end. But the end didn't come. They surrounded him, weapons raised, waiting for an order. And then she appeared, the general, different from the others. Not because of strength, they all had that, but because of the way she observed, how she calculated, how she decided. She didn't ask who he was. She asked why he was still standing. His name was Gareth, 32 years old, former cartographer for the crown, not a soldier, not a lord, just someone who read maps better than most read people. He had served the kingdom faithfully for 12 years, drew supply routes, marked enemy positions, planned sieges that never failed, until the day he suggested a different approach, a peace treaty, negotiation instead of invasion. They called him a coward, a traitor, a threat to the realm's honor. The trial lasted 3 hours. The sentence was immediate, exile to the Wildlands. No appeal, no mercy, no second chance. They stripped him of his title, his home, his name in the records, everything that proved he had ever mattered. And then they rode him to the edge of the known world and left him there with nothing but the clothes on his back and the certainty that he would die before the week was out. But he didn't, because she found him first. In the following days, he was kept under watch, not as a common prisoner, but as something undefined. They didn't chain him, didn't lock him away, but he couldn't leave, couldn't move freely, couldn't speak without drawing attention. He was kept in a tent at the edge of the encampment. Simple, cold, functional. Guards rotated outside every few hours. He didn't try to escape, didn't try to fight. He just waited, observed, learned. The orc camp was nothing like what the kingdom had taught him to expect. There was order, structure, discipline. The tents were arranged in concentric circles. Supply lines were efficient. Patrols were consistent. Weapons were maintained. There was no chaos, no savagery, just a military force that knew exactly what it was doing. And at the center of it all was her. She didn't visit him right away. She sent others, warriors who would enter his tent without warning, drop a map on the ground, point at it, wait. The first time it happened, Gareth didn't understand. He stared at the map, rough, hand-drawn, showing a river valley and a fortified position. The warrior pointed at the fort, then at him, then back at the fort. Gareth hesitated. Then he crouched down, studied the map, noticed the problems immediately. The fort was well defended from the front, but the eastern side was exposed. The supply route was predictable. The patrol pattern had gaps. He pointed them out, one by one. The warrior watched, said nothing, then left. The next day, a different warrior, a different map, same test. Gareth answered again, and again the day after that. He began to understand. She was testing him, not his loyalty, not his strength, his mind, his ability to see what others missed, to find weaknesses, to think like someone who had spent years planning victories. On the fourth day, she came herself. She entered without announcing, tall, broad-shouldered, scarred across the left side of her face. Her armor was practical, leather and iron, worn from use but maintained with care. Her eyes were sharp, not cruel, not kind, just measuring. She carried a rolled map under one arm. She spread it on the ground between them. It showed a human fortress, one Gareth recognized immediately. He had drawn it himself, 3 years ago, for a campaign that never happened. She pointed at it, then at him. "You made this." It wasn't a question. Gareth nodded. "You know it." Another nod. "Then tell me how to take it." He stared at her. This was different. This wasn't a test. This was a demand. And it was treason. Helping an enemy force attack his own people. Everything he had ever been taught screamed at him to refuse, to stay silent, to die with whatever honor he had left. But then he thought about the kingdom, the trial, the exile, the way they had erased him like he had never existed. And he thought about the fact that she hadn't killed him when she easily could have, hadn't tortured him, hadn't humiliated him. She had just asked. So he answered. He explained the fortress, the gates, the blind spots, the rotation schedules, the supply vulnerabilities, the morale problems. He spoke for 20 minutes. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she rolled the map back up, stood, and left without a word. That night, he didn't sleep. He kept expecting them to come, to drag him out, to execute him for what he had done. But no one came. The camp remained quiet. The guards changed shifts as always. Nothing happened. The next morning she returned, this time with 3 other orcs, commanders by the way they carried themselves. She gestured for him to stand. He did. She spoke in her own language. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. She was explaining something, justifying something. One of the commanders argued back. She cut him off, sharp, final. The argument ended. She turned to Gareth. "You will come with us." "Where?" "To see if you were right." They rode out an hour later. Gareth was given a horse, not his own choice, not his own gear, but a horse nonetheless. They traveled in a column, 50 warriors, fast and silent. The general rode at the front. Gareth was placed in the middle, guarded but not bound. They reached the fortress by nightfall, stopped a mile out, made camp without fires. The general called him forward, showed him the fortress in the distance, torches burning along the walls, patrols moving predictably, everything exactly as he had described. She watched his face. "You told the truth." "I did." "Why?" He didn't have a good answer. Or maybe he did, but couldn't say it out loud. That he was tired of kingdoms that threw people away. Tired of being nothing. Tired of loyalty that only went one direction. So he said the simpler truth. "Because you asked." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Stay here, watch, learn." The attack happened 2 hours before dawn. No siege weapons, no battering rams, just precision. They hit the eastern wall exactly where Gareth had said it was weakest. used the patrol gaps exactly as he had mapped them. The guards didn't even sound the alarm until it was too late. The fortress fell in 40 minutes. Minimal casualties, maximum efficiency. By the time the sun rose, the general's banner was flying from the walls. She found him afterward, still standing where she had left him, watching. She didn't smile, didn't gloat, just looked at him with something that might have been respect. "You were right." "I was." "Could you do it again?" He met her eyes. "Yes." She nodded once, then turned to her commanders, spoke in her language again. This time, no one argued. When she finished, she looked back at Gareth. "You will ride with us. You will see our maps, our plans, our weaknesses, and you will tell me the truth. Always. If you lie, you die. If you run, you die. If you betray us..." She paused. "You die slowly. And if I help, then you live. And you matter." It was the strangest offer he had ever received, but also the most honest. "I accept." She didn't shake his hand, didn't clap his shoulder, just turned and walked away. But he noticed something. The guards around him had stepped back. Just a little. Just enough. He wasn't a prisoner anymore. He was something else. The weeks that followed were unlike anything Gareth had ever experienced. He was given a tent, a bedroll, regular meals. He was allowed to move through the camp freely, though eyes followed him everywhere. He was brought maps daily, some from scouts, some from captured documents, some hand-drawn from memory. He studied them, pointed out flaws, suggested alternatives, predicted enemy movements, and more often than not, he was right. The general began to rely on him, not publicly, not in front of the full war council, but privately. She would call him to her tent after dark, spread a map between them, ask his opinion. He would give it. She would listen, decide, act. And when her decisions led to victories, she never credited him, never mentioned his name. But she kept calling him back. They didn't speak much beyond strategy. She wasn't interested in small talk. Neither was he. But he began to notice things. The way she carried the weight of command. The way her warriors respected her not out of fear, but out of trust. The way she made decisions that protected her people even when it cost her personally. She was nothing like the monsters the kingdom had described. She was just a leader, doing what leaders do. One night, after a particularly difficult planning session, she poured 2 cups of something dark and strong, handed him one. He took it. They drank in silence for a while. Then she spoke. "Why did they exile you?" He hadn't expected the question. "I suggested peace." "With us?" "Yes." "And they called you a traitor." "They did." She nodded slowly. "We would have done the same." He looked at her. "Would you?" She considered it. "A year ago? Yes. But now..." She gestured at the maps between them. "Now I think maybe you were right. This war costs too much, takes too much, ruins too much. Then why keep fighting? Because your kingdom won't stop. And if we stop, we die." It was the most honest conversation they had ever had. And it changed something. Not dramatically, not loudly, but something shifted. He wasn't just a tool anymore. He was someone she could speak to, someone who understood, someone who didn't judge. The turning point came 3 months into his time with the army. They were camped near the border, planning the next move. Gareth was in his tent when the shouts started. He stepped outside, saw warriors running, weapons being drawn, alarm in the air. He found the general quickly. "What's happening?" "Ambush. Human forces. They knew we were here." His stomach dropped. "How many?" "Enough." The battle was chaos. The humans had brought cavalry, archers, infantry. They hit the camp from 3 sides at once. The orcs fought back hard, but they were caught off guard, outnumbered. Gareth grabbed a spear from a fallen warrior. Not because he was a fighter, but because staying unarmed felt like suicide. He moved through the camp, trying to stay out of the way, trying not to die. He saw the general in the center of it all, holding the line, directing her warriors, refusing to retreat. And then he saw the real danger. A group of human knights, 20 of them, Heavy armor, moving as a unit. They weren't engaging the main force. They were circling, flanking, heading straight for the command tent, straight for her. Gareth realized it immediately. This wasn't just an attack. This was an assassination. They were here to kill the general, end the leadership, break the army. He didn't think. He just moved. He ran toward the general, shouting, waving. She saw him, didn't understand at first. Then she followed his gaze, saw the knights, saw the trap. She barked orders. Her warriors shifted, formed a defensive ring. The knights hit them hard. The orcs held, barely. Gareth found himself in the middle of it, spear in hand. No idea what he was doing. A knight came at him. He stabbed wildly, missed. The knight swung. Gareth dodged, tripped, fell. The knight raised his sword, and then the general was there. She drove her axe through the knight's chest, pulled it free, grabbed Gareth, hauled him up. Stay close. He did. The fight lasted another 10 minutes. The orcs slowly pushed the knights back, killed most of them, drove the rest into retreat. When it was over, the camp was a mess, wounded everywhere, dead on both sides. The general stood in the center of it all, breathing hard, bloodied but alive. She found Gareth, stared at him. "You warned me." "I saw them coming." "You saved half this camp." He shook his head. "You saved me." She didn't argue, just gripped his shoulder once, hard, then walked away to tend to her people. The next morning she called a gathering, the entire camp, every warrior who could stand. She stood on a raised platform. Gareth was brought forward. He didn't know why. She spoke in her language, loud, clear. Her words carried across the crowd. He didn't understand most of it, but he caught his name, and he caught the reactions. Surprise, suspicion, anger. She kept speaking, her tone sharp, defiant. When she finished, she switched to the common tongue, looked directly at him. "You are no longer a prisoner. You are no longer a stranger. You are now my strategist. You will advise me. You will plan with me. You will stand with us." The crowd erupted, not in cheers, in outrage. Warriors shouted, some in his language, some in theirs. The meaning was clear. They didn't want him, didn't trust him, didn't accept him. The general raised her hand. Silence fell. She spoke again, calm, cold, final. "Any who challenge this, challenge me." No one moved. She stepped down, walked past Gareth, leaned in just enough to whisper, "Now you prove it." And that's exactly what he did. Over the following months, Gareth became part of the War Council, not as an equal, not as a friend, but as a voice that mattered. He analyzed enemy movements, predicted supply shortages, found weaknesses in fortifications, suggested tactical shifts that saved lives. Some warriors still hated him, refused to speak to him, spat when he passed. But others began to see results, began to understand that his presence meant fewer of them died. And slowly, painfully, grudgingly, they accepted him. The general never defended him publicly again. She didn't need to. She had made her position clear, and she held to it. But privately, in the quiet moments between battles, she would ask him things. Not just about strategy, about the kingdom, about the people, about why they feared the orcs so much. He answered honestly, told her about the propaganda, the lies, the stories designed to dehumanize, to make killing easier. She listened without interrupting, and when he finished, she would nod. "They do the same to us. I know. And yet you're here. I'm here because you gave me a choice. They didn't." She looked at him then, really looked, like she was seeing something she hadn't expected. "You are not what I thought you would be. What did you think? Weak, broken, desperate. I am all those things." "No." She shook her head. "You are something else, something better." He didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. But he remembered it. The crisis came 6 months in. Gareth was reviewing supply reports when a scout burst into the command tent, out of breath, panicked. The general was there immediately. "Report. Human army. 3 days south, 50,000 strong." The tent went silent. 50,000. The orc force numbered 8,000. The math was brutal. The general didn't flinch. Confirmed? Yes, General. She dismissed the scout, turned to her commanders. Options. They debated for hours. Retreat, guerrilla tactics, defensive positions. Nothing worked. The numbers were too overwhelming. The terrain too open. Every plan ended in slaughter. Gareth sat quietly, listening, thinking. And then he spoke. There's another way. Everyone stopped, looked at him. The general gestured. Speak. They're not coming to fight you. What? They're coming to exterminate you. This isn't a battle. It's a purge. They want to end this war by ending your people. Silence. One of the commanders growled. Then we die fighting. Or, Gareth said slowly, we don't fight at all. The room erupted. Accusations of cowardice, betrayal, dishonor. The general raised her hand. Silence again. She looked at Gareth. Explain. He stood, walked to the map, pointed. They're moving through the Greyvale Pass, narrow, steep, perfect for an army that size, if they're not attacked. But if something blocks the pass, if something forces them to stop, they become a target. For what? For themselves. He explained. The pass had cliffs on both sides, loose rock, unstable slopes. If enough force hit the right points at the right time, the cliffs would collapse. Bury the pass. Trap the army. Not all of it, but enough. Enough to break their momentum. Enough to cause chaos. Enough to make them vulnerable. The general stared at the map. You're talking about an avalanche. Yes. That would take time, preparation, precision. It would. And if it fails, we lose everything. If we fight them directly, we lose everything anyway. She didn't answer right away. She studied the map, ran the calculations in her head, weighed the risks. Then she looked at her commanders. Thoughts? They argued. Some supported it. Some called it insane. But eventually they agreed. Not because they loved the plan, but because there was no better option. The general made the decision. We do it. Gareth leads the preparation. One of the commanders stepped forward. You trust him with this? She didn't hesitate. Yes. The next 2 days were frantic. Gareth worked with engineers, scouts, demolition teams. They mapped the pass, identified weak points, placed charges, rigged supports, timed detonations. It was delicate work. One mistake would warn the humans. Another would collapse the cliffs too early, or too late, or not at all. Gareth barely slept. He checked everything twice, 3 times, adjusted, recalculated. The general stayed close, not interfering, just watching, making sure he had what he needed. On the 3rd day, the human army entered the pass. Gareth watched from a ridge, the general beside him. 50,000 soldiers, marching in formation, banners flying, confident, unstoppable. Gareth's hand was on the detonation signal. A simple lever, one pull. Everything would either work or it wouldn't. The general looked at him. Are you sure? No. Then why are you doing it? Because you asked. She almost smiled. Almost. Then do it. He pulled the lever. The explosion was enormous. The cliffs shook, cracked, and then they fell. Tons of rock, cascading down, crashing into the pass, into the army. Screams rose. Dust filled the air. The world became chaos. Gareth couldn't see the results, couldn't count the dead, but he could hear it. The collapse, the panic, the destruction. When the dust finally settled, the pass was gone, buried under a mountain of rubble. The army was cut in half, the front half trapped, the back half unreachable, communications severed, supply lines destroyed, command structure shattered. The general stood, signaled her forces. Now we fight. The orc warriors hit the trapped portion of the army like a hammer, fast, brutal, precise. The humans were disorganized, leaderless, panicked. They fought back, but without coordination, without hope. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, the human force was broken. Survivors fled. The pass remained impassable. The war's momentum had shifted, and Gareth, Gareth had just helped his own people lose. He stood on the ridge long after the fighting stopped, staring at the destruction, at the bodies, at the consequences of his choices. The general found him there, stood beside him in silence. Finally, she spoke. "You did what needed to be done. I killed my own people. You saved mine. Does that make it right?" She didn't answer immediately, then quietly, "No, but it makes it necessary." He closed his eyes. "They'll call me a traitor. They already did. Now they'll be right." She turned to face him fully. "You are not a traitor. You are someone who chose truth over lies, people over power, survival over pride. That is not betrayal. That is honor." He looked at her. "Your people don't all see it that way." "No, but I do, and that is enough." It wasn't enough, but it helped. The weeks following the battle were strange. The human kingdom reeled from the loss, sent envoys, demanded answers, threatened retaliation, but they didn't attack again. Couldn't. Not yet. The Orc army regrouped, reinforced, prepared, and Gareth became something he had never expected. Known, recognized, feared. Stories spread. The human strategist who destroyed an army, the traitor who sided with monsters, the ghost who haunted the Wildlands. He hated the stories, but he couldn't stop them. The general's trust in him became absolute. She included him in every decision, every plan, every meeting. Her commanders no longer questioned it. Some even began to respect him, not as one of them, but as someone useful, someone who had proven himself. That was enough. The general herself changed too. She spoke to him more openly, asked his thoughts on matters beyond war, listened when he answered. They weren't friends. Friendship felt too simple, too small. They were something else. Partners. Equals in a way that transcended species or origin. One night, months after the pass, she called him to her tent. Not for strategy, not for reports, just to talk. They sat across from each other. She poured 2 cups. They drank. And then she asked the question he had been avoiding. "Do you regret it?" "Every day." "Then why stay?" He thought about it. Really thought. Because leaving wouldn't undo it, wouldn't bring them back, wouldn't make me innocent again. All it would do is make their deaths meaningless. She nodded. "You carry it well. I don't feel like I do. No one ever does." They sat in silence after that. Comfortable, understanding. 2 people who had made impossible choices and lived with the weight. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was acceptance. And sometimes, that was all you could hope for. The final blow came a year after his exile. The human kingdom sent assassins, not for the general, for him. They wanted him dead, wanted to erase the symbol he had become, the symbol of their failure, of their lies, of their cruelty. The assassins infiltrated the camp at night, skilled, professional, deadly. They reached his tent, found him sleeping, raised their blades, and then the general was there. She had been waiting, expecting this. She killed 3 of them herself. Her guards killed the rest. When it was over, she stood in Gareth's tent, bloodied, breathing hard. He was awake now, staring. "You knew." "I suspected. You were guarding me." "Yes." "Why?" She looked at him like the answer was obvious. "Because you matter." Those 3 words hit harder than anything else. Because you matter. Not because you're useful, not because you're convenient, because you matter. He had spent his entire life being told his value was conditional, earned, temporary, and here was someone who simply decided he mattered and defended that decision with her life. He stood, faced her. "They'll keep coming. Let them. I'm a liability. You are my strategist and my friend." It was the first time she had used that word. Friend. It felt inadequate, but also exactly right. He nodded. "Then I stay." "Good." She left. He sat back down, stared at the blood on the floor, at the bodies being dragged away, at the life he had somehow built in the least likely place, and he realized something. He wasn't exiled anymore. He wasn't rejected. He wasn't invisible. He was exactly where he was supposed to be, with people who saw him, valued him, chose him, not despite who he was, but because of it. The war continued. Battles were fought, territory changed hands, lives were lost. But something else happened too. Slowly, quietly. Communication began. Not official, not public, but real. Envoys were sent, messages exchanged, proposals made. The general led the negotiations. Gareth advised. Together they built something neither side had thought possible. A ceasefire, not peace, not yet, but a stopping of the killing. A recognition that maybe, just maybe, there was another way. The human kingdom resisted, called it weakness, called her a fool, but she held firm. And when they saw the alternative, endless war with no victory, they agreed. Reluctantly, bitterly, but they agreed. Gareth stood beside her when the treaty was signed, not as a representative, not as a diplomat, just as someone who had helped make it possible. The human delegates stared at him with disgust, with hatred. He didn't care, because across the table the general met his eyes and nodded. Once, small, but full of meaning. They had done it, together, against every expectation, every prejudice, every lie. They had built something better. Years later, Gareth still lived among the orcs. He never returned to the human kingdom, never tried. He had no family there, no friends, no life to reclaim. Everything that mattered was here. He had a place, a purpose, a people who accepted him. The general remained his closest companion. They worked together, planned together, built together. She never married. Neither did he. Not because they were together in that way, but because they didn't need to be. What they had was deeper than romance. It was partnership, trust, mutual respect forged in fire and sealed in blood. He grew old in the Wildlands. His hair turned gray, his hands grew weary, but his mind stayed sharp, and his value never diminished. The younger generation of orcs grew up hearing stories about the human strategist, the one who chose them, who fought for them, who proved that loyalty wasn't about blood. It was about choice, and he became a symbol, not of betrayal, but of something harder to define, of the possibility that people could be more than what they were born into, that they could choose their own path, their own people, their own truth. When he finally died, decades after his exile, the general was there, older now, scarred, but still strong. She sat beside him in his final hours. He looked at her, smiled weakly. "Did I do the right thing?" She took his hand. "You did the human thing. You chose love over hatred, truth over lies, people over power. Yes, you did the right thing." He closed his eyes. "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me." She held his hand until the end, and when he was gone she stood, walked outside, addressed the gathered crowd, hundreds of orcs, waiting, grieving. She spoke clearly. "He was not born one of us, but he died one of us. We honor him. We remember him. We carry what he taught us. That strength is not just in battle, it is in choice, and he chose us. Let that never be forgotten." They buried him in the hills overlooking the camp. A simple grave, no grand monument, just a stone with his name, and beneath it, the words she had inscribed herself. He mattered. Because in the end, that was all anyone really needed. So that's the story of the man who was thrown away by his own kingdom and became irreplaceable to those who found him. Makes you think, doesn't it? About loyalty, about worth, about what it really means to belong somewhere. If this hit you the way it hit me, subscribe to the channel. There are more stories like this one. Stories about people who chose differently, who saw clearly, who refused to be what the world expected them to be. Don't miss the next one. Hit that button and drop a comment telling me, would you have stayed or would you have run the moment you had the chance?